So welcome. Thank you guys for all coming. Thank you for having me. So let's start with all of you invest in companies at the different stages in the venture process. So tell me about kind of how you think about what are the differentiators you look for when you get pitched a new startup?
Karen.
So Liz and I were talking a little bit earlier about this, and starting a company is really hard. It's a lonely job. It's often a thankless job. And so I think the core thing that I look for is that someone really loves it, because it's such a roller coaster. And seeing
How can you tell, though, that somebody really
So you can tell in a meeting, there's a level of enthusiasm, and there's also a level of knowing your stuff. I mean, if you love something, it's not work to some extent. Like, I've had founders tell me they've had to, you talk to Mike Bloomberg, and he in the early days had to buy the coffee maker, had to clean the bathrooms, and he did all this because he just really had a vision and wanted to see it come to fruition. And so that really does come through when you spend more time with a founder. I also don't look at it as a transactional thing. I feel like we're entering into a partnership, and so I try and spend as much time as possible with the founder so that we can really get to know each other and know that it's going to be something where when there's ups, that's great, we're celebrating, but when there's downs, we're figuring out how to problem solve and get things on track.
Jessica?
Well, I think all of you have heard a little bit about what we do here at Workbench today. So outside of partnering with great folks and organizations like Salesforce, we first and foremost are an enterprise VC fund, right? And our sweet spot, and this is actually intentional how we're sitting, because Karen, you invest generally at the seed, at Bloomberg Beta. We, at Workbench, invest at the Series A, right? And for us, nothing is probably more clear than at that Series A, right? Where enterprise customers are like oxygen. And I see a lot of nodding heads here and people who feel the pain. And the reason why our team at Workbench can feel this pain so much so along with you is because our team actually all comes out of corporate IT ourselves. So you might have heard earlier the Swahili to Cisco path that I've taken. My very woke co-founder, John, here in the back, wave, hi, John, who's been a phenomenal support of all of this and who came out of Morgan Stanley, the tech BD group there, which helps to find the best startups to work with internally. And I have other team members here from Bank of America and Forrester. So to the extent that if you're an enterprise and you're selling to these really large companies, procurement and SOC 2 audits and POC negotiations are just like pure reality, right? And I think for a lot of other VC funds, it's not very fun, it's not very sexy. We lean into that so hard. We will geek out with you all day, every day about those types of things because we just know how critical that is. And I see here even Neil, who does a great session with us, and where he just literally tells the truth, yells the truth at our startups about what it takes to sell into large companies. So to your point around traction, right? It's different for, I think, every sector and even every vertical you sell into, right? We try not to be very, dedicated to just metrics because that doesn't tell the whole story, right? And especially in enterprise sales where some quarters are make or break and others less so. So we generally see, for example, if you're selling to HR tech, you have a different ARR than if you're an AI for compliance company selling into large banks compliance orgs like Marlon Intelligence, one of our portfolios, and Liz with cybersecurity. So that's why I think depending on your VC partner, you should really, the partner that really understands deeply how hard it is and how we can be helpful.
So I'll give it a bit of context on Salesforce Ventures before answering the question, since I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with sort of our investment model. We're the strategic investment arm of Salesforce, where really strategic is the operative word in describing how we invest. So we've got over 200 active portfolio companies today that are across the enterprise SaaS ecosystem, primarily at the application layer. all of whom have the potential or are already building on our platform. So we're really looking to invest in companies that have the potential to integrate with us. We believe that's where we can extend the value of our investment and truly be a strategic investor, beyond the check that we're writing. If you can integrate with our platform, we can help bring you into deals. We can connect you into our customer and partner ecosystem. And so when we're looking at companies, aside from stage, which for us, we're primarily focused on sort of Series A and B, that's where we're writing about 70% of our checks. We actually don't really play in the seed world at all, as we believe that's the stage at which companies are ready to think about partnering with a company like Salesforce. You've probably figured out that product market fit. You have those early customers, and they're asking about integrations. At the seed stage, you're still probably trying to figure some of that out. And we have room to expand into sort of growth stage investments as well. So for us, we are given we are a strategic investor, that thesis around what the integration is, the value that we see in building a partnership with this company and what that adds to our ecosystem is critical to our thesis. And then I would say, like sort of Jess and the Workbench team, given the stage that they're investing at, you can become very metrics driven at the early stage in enterprise investing, which is actually, for me, who's also a little bit of a math and data nerd, is really interesting. So we're looking for early signals of success around an A, at least $1 million of ARR, 5-figure ACV deals growing into 6-figure ACV deals, hopefully pretty quickly. Starting to see sort of net negative retention. So there's a lot of really interesting and core metrics that you can start to look at in the early stage, which I think is really what distinguishes early stage enterprise investing from early stage consumer investing.
So that's interesting, the data aspect. Jess, you said that data doesn't always tell the whole story, but I'm curious to see how can you guys tell me briefly how you use data to support your investment decisions?
Well, I'll just follow up and double click on my point, right? Which is, how many of you have hustled to close that last deal at the end of the year in December, right? I think I see so many nodding heads, and the reason is because if you're selling to enterprise, your customers have budget, and that budget works on a cycle, and I'm sure all of you know it now, right, by heart. So there are going to be some quarters where I'm sure you're going to close deals very easily, and other ones where the customer budget's not there. So that's really the point I mean when I say you need to look at it with a nuanced view, right? And not every contract is going to tell the whole story. A lot of our companies, quite frankly, will have 12 to 24 months sales cycles. And as a VC, that can feel really uncomfortable, right? It's a very long time. But if these startups are going to be uncomfortable and be able to go through it every single day, then we can be that partner alongside with you. A big part of our DNA is being here in New York City. 52 of the Fortune 500s right in our backyard. That's where we do all these tentacles, if you will, and bring in these corporates, connect you with executive briefings, help make that sales process less painful.
And I'd say when it comes to data, look, I'm investing at the seed stage, so
right.
Sometimes it's someone's vision. Ideally, I like to see a prototype or something we can sort through so I can see how it works. So a lot of the data is, the quality of the founder, which really should be that at any stage as well. So one piece of counsel to people in the room is think about your references. Because that's where I spend a lot of time, is trying to get to know you through people who know you better, especially if we don't have the same longevity. And then one of the other things, look, I'm at Bloomberg, so I can't help myself about data. We do something we call our Future Founders Project, where we analyze 2 million profiles of people in New York City and the Bay Area, and we see if we can predict who's likely to start a company. And we bring these people together, we call them our future founders, and we've had some great success of people actually going on to start companies from it. So anyway, we'll see. We're trying different ways to find you before you're necessarily sure you're going to be a founder.
That's interesting. Can I follow up on that with you?
Sure.
Do you think that venture capital can just be completely automated with using algorithms?
So I'd love to see more of my job get automated because I spend too much time working. But that being said, it is a people business. So one of the things I love about the Future Founder Project is we get a diverse set of founders. I mean, data is, obfuscated, so it does take some of that out of the equation. But there is still a level of intangibles that I'm not sure machine learning is going to take over yet.
Okay, so the reason I ask is because, let me find this stat. So Social Capital recently launched a product called Capital as a Service, where basically it automates a lot of the decision making. So as a result of that, the firm committed to funding 42% female and majority non-white founder-led startups. So what does that kind of say about human bias in venture capital?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a crack at this one first. I think the bias exists, right? But the bias also starts by looking at the makeup of the venture community, right? So when you look across the top 100 venture firms in the country, I think the statistic is 8% of their employees are women, right? 8% of the investment professionals are women. So that it's, sort of no wonder that if that's what the makeup of the people who are writing the checks is, that we are seeing then bias in who the checks are written to. I think there is a bias that exists. Is it necessarily going to be fixed by automation and purely data analysis? No. I think the real opportunity is how do we, get more women like Hillary into, partner positions at large top funds where they have the ability to fund great women entrepreneurs. We've been talking a lot today about how we hope to inspire you to go do great things in your companies and start companies. I hope there's some of you out there too that want to be a VC, because we really need to change this community as well in order to reinforce what we're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd add another point to that. A couple years ago, I wrote a post about trying to get the LP community to back, or at least start collecting the data on the venture community, because I think it's like a whole ecosystem. So in addition to getting more women as VCs, I'd love to see more women on boards, people paying attention to the LP community, putting more pressure, or at least starting to ask the questions, so that people add and their junior teams, starting with the VC associate exposure, thinking about partners, adding to their boards, as well as the founders that we back.
And Jess, this question is for you. So last year, I think 2% of female founders got 2% of all venture funding. Yeah. So how can that stat change, and how does it relate to enterprise tech, women in tech?
Yeah, you probably all saw, if you were here at the start, that 137 number. At the break, I was talking to a number of you, so thank you to all of you for your feedback. But I was saying, hey, when we set out, we really thought that there was probably another 200 that we just didn't know about. And I please encourage and ask all of you after this conference to look at this sheet and make sure that we have everyone, because if there's not an issue, if there are more women and CEOs of enterprise startups, then the real problem is that they're not being known, right? And people are not coming to the table and not speaking up about them and for them. Right? When we put this out on Twitter, it was amazing to see certain founders had multiple people chiming in to say, hey, you missed this person. Hey, you missed the same person. So that's another, I think, angle and element I would push us all to think is who are going to be the people who will, on Twitter, call you out, right? And be like, you need to know this person, right? Because that's how this list will aggregate. And I think we can talk more about inbound and outbound, right, which is ultimate. Like, we can go out and scour for all of you, but we also need all of you to start these enterprise startups.
Yeah. So part of this panel is about inclusion and access. And Meredith, Salesforce, Fortune just published its best places to work for, and Salesforce was #1. So, everybody tells founders, grow quickly, grow as fast as you can, but how can you do that and make sure that the culture doesn't kind of break in the process?
Yeah. So I was not an extremely early employee at Salesforce, but there is, sort of a very common early company story that is told, and that really revolves around our company's commitment to giving back. So Mark and the co-founders of the company, pretty much from day one, I think Suzanne was employee number 24 or 25. She helped found the Salesforce Foundation, Suzanne DiBianca. This was instilled from the very beginning. And we actually work quite closely with an organization called Pledge 1%, which encourages all startups to take the same pledge that Salesforce took, which is 1-1-1. 1% of equity, 1% of product, 1% or profit, and then 1% of your employees' time. And think about the power. I mean, I've seen it firsthand at Salesforce, the power of instilling giving back as a core value at your company. It has been, not only a nice thing for us to do and a nice thing for us from a marketing perspective. We engage our customers on this topic. We engage our partners on this topic. It is good for business. So I think we need to move away from the idea that building culture and building a culture around positive things like equality or philanthropy has the potential to harm business, but rather that pursuing these things is good for you. And I can point to an earlier stage company in our portfolio as well, as you can look at me and be like, Salesforce, you're a big company, right? On just the equality in pay and hiring initiative. We have a portfolio company, which is part of our impact fund called Hustle, where the COO and I actually went to high school together, but he is the product of a single parent household in a rough section of the Bronx, and he was super committed from day one in founding this company to have equality in hiring, and they've done it. And they're killing it, by the way. They went from less than $1 million in ARR to they're going to hit 10 million shortly in less than a year, right? So, we are so excited about their success because we think that it truly, sort of is an example of the story that you're not trading, that these things are actually connected and positively connected.
Got it. So we're running out of time. I have a million more questions. But my final one is, can you give me one very specific, practical thing that all the people here can take into their professional lives or at their startup?
Yeah, so I think, I think a lot of this is we see some amazing women in the room, and we'd love to see that be at companies and startups in general. And I think the way we're going to get there is through micro actions, like little things that aggregate into a real meaningful movement. And I'm excited because after doing this for many years, I'm feeling like the energy and the momentum behind that. And so one tactical piece of advice, I'm actually taking a playbook from Sarah Arnold from Donut over there, which I think is bring somebody with you to something. And I know you mentioned it earlier, but the young up-and-comers in the company, she brought along Ariel, who joined about 5-6 months ago. And I think that's it. If you're going to an event, it not only not makes it as lonely, but it also helps build the community.
Perfect. Well, so I collect playbook pages like it's my job, which maybe it is. So I'm running Evernote. So two of my favorite tactical ones is one, take a look at your pitch deck if you're a founder, and all of your numbers, all of your market, all of your product. Just try to 2x it, just as a thought experiment, right?
2x it in what period of time?
just as like a hypothetical, if you're going to pitch to a VC, if you used the 2x of the numbers, right? And the reason I say that is because I find in a lot of meetings, I'm pushing. I'm like, I think you can go even bigger, right? I think this is a feature. I think it can be a platform. And you need to remember for VCs, the business needs to be a big one. And again, we didn't touch on it even at all, but not everyone should raise venture funding. It's not a good fit for every business. And we 1,000% up here know and agree and would espouse that. But that's the piece I would just push all of you. And you should just do it. It's probably not going to be accurate, obviously, but just as a thought experiment to say what feels like it's possible. And I think you'd be surprised that it's actually even a little bit more than you thought you could push yourself to do.
And I'm going to add a B to that. So do that on the revenue line, but don't grow your expenses.
Yay! Yes, from the CV. Very good fiscal responsibility at an early stage. And then come
Which
work with
we've seen women tend to have in building companies, by the way.
And then the second playbook very quickly is from, some of you might know Angela Lee from 37 Angels. I got this from her, which is to every week, try to reach out to 3 new people, right? It is like a muscle you have to build. And if you're a founder, there's so many things you can be reaching out to people about, whether it's customers or intros or hiring, whether, for any of us, I love what you said, Hillary, about how you were really working so hard at Oracle, but not necessarily networking. So even for me, it's a personal struggle. I don't always have time, but if you make that time, those 3 outreaches will become mentors, there'll be open doors, there'll be a plane ride, and more.
So I'll give a piece of advice for those in the room who are working at a large company, because while I'm part of Salesforce Ventures, we are still part of a 30,000 person company. It's incredibly important to build relationships across the entire company to the extent that you can. It's so easy to get siloed into your specific function, trying to please your manager, making sure everyone on your team likes you, making sure your manager's manager likes you. But where the real opportunity is going to come for you in joining these large companies is by building those relationships with people that are outside your team. And so a challenge to sort of everyone, I think whether, quite frankly, you're in an early stage company or a late stage company, make those connections, create those connections out of what you're doing. You may find yourself in a job that is completely different than a path you thought you were going to go down. Yeah. And it's all relationship based, is what I've learned. And you'll have the opportunity to create options for yourself that you never knew were possible.
So the common theme here is widen your network. Great. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.